Welcome back to What America's Thinking. Republicans and Democrats ramped up the tough-on-crime rhetoric ahead of the 2022 midterms, shelling out dollars on ads hammering the topic of crime. According to the Washington Post, Republicans spent nearly 60%, or $49 million, of campaign ads related to crime. Meanwhile, Democrats poured $36 million highlighting the issue. And while the midterms are over, the issue of crime and police reform are very much at play. Florida governor and potential 2024 GOP presidential candidate Ron DeSantis touted a tough-on-crime message in his three-state tour over President's Day. He made stops in New York, the suburbs of Philadelphia, and Chicago in an effort to appeal to the pro-police and crime-concerned people, all while pinning the rise in crime on cities run by liberal politicians.
Law enforcement across the nation has also come under scrutiny for inadequate policing or policing that is too brutal, which makes addressing crime more difficult. During the president's State of the Union address, President Biden called for funding police and providing them with training they need while holding them to higher standards. Joining us now to dive deeper into crime and policing issue is Corey Grable, a former member of the New York City Transit Police, a New York City police officer, and now a candidate to lead the New York City Police Benevolent Association. Corey, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Definitely appreciate this opportunity to speak with you all.
Of course, thank you for joining us. So just to dive into it, policing has become obviously so incredibly politicized in this country. You heard President Biden talking about it during his State of the Union address. But this past week, we saw Florida Governor Ron DeSantis visiting New York, visiting Chicago, Philadelphia, or outside of Philadelphia, very much on a bit of a tour ahead of a potential presidential run. But he's focusing on crime and policing and very much talking to members of the police community. I wanted to get your sense on, how it's become so politicized in this country, and how do you think Democrats are handling this issue? Because it seems that Republicans are the ones that are going more on the offensive on it.
Well, policing has always been an issue in terms of the politics in this country. As far as the Democrats, I think that unfortunately they've gotten on the wrong side of the issue. The reality is many of the policies that's been created has actually had this unintended consequence of actually hurting people that they were aiming to protect. In many of these kind of urban communities and urban settings, and particularly here in New York City, those kind of communities really need the police more than any other segment in society. But when you start creating policies that kind of handcuff the police, and again, it causes these unintended consequences, poor people of color particularly, are always usually the biggest losers. So we need to come up with these kind of comprehensive strategies and approaches to create a balance to make sure that, one, you get quality policing, but also you don't handcuff the police and, create these kind of unfair disciplinary matrices. And therefore, that's one of the reasons why I decided to make these run amongst some other issues.
So when Democrats put in policies that you say handcuff the police, they're usually responding to incidents where police don't use their training, and I'm being very diplomatic here, incidents that really shake the nation of police violence. Where is that middle ground? Where is the middle ground where police are equipped with both the training and the tools to go out into our neighborhoods and do their job without the risk of them inciting violence or them perpetrating violence on regular people?
Right. Well, I think that it's unfortunately due to social media, and a lot of times when you see these kind of incidents on Instagram or whatever the platform, it's usually not the full story. And listen, I'm not defending wrong. Wrong is wrong. Let's get that. I want to make that abundantly clear. But sometimes when you create this monolithic police department, meaning that whatever happens in California, whatever happens in New York, what happens in South Carolina, et cetera, the problem is usually policy is created from that standpoint, where it made a more prudent responsibility or response to those issues is to go into the local municipality, outline the problems, maybe go back 20 years, and then identify what are the issues that need to be addressed. And then from that standpoint, come up with a comprehensive approach versus just kind of responding to something that didn't even occur in that particular municipality.
Corey, you're running to lead the PBA in New York City, and obviously that will, I imagine, have an impact on other police departments across the country, even though, as you say, each department is very different. What do you hope to bring to the table if you are elected to PBA president?
Well, the first and foremost, the main reason why I'm running is because the current president, Patrick J. Lynch, has failed to deliver a timely contract to New York City police officers. When you start talking about some of the issues, one of the things that could address some of those problems is to compensate New York City police officers with a fair wage. Right here in New York City, when you look at the wage disparity with some of our counterparts in other municipalities in the local area, we're way behind. So currently, we're a few years behind in terms of contract, almost 6 years, and the officers aren't happy. And I think that when you have a properly trained officer, a properly compensated officer, you're going to get a better officer, and some of the outlining problems that you're talking about will be addressed. So
you're running to run a union that made headlines for its political activity last presidential election. Do you think police unions have become too politicized and lost focus on making conditions better for cops?
Well, I can't speak for all unions. I only can speak for the New York City PBA and the things that I have information on. I think that we've kind of gotten away from maybe dealing with some of the local issues with the members and maybe the local community leaders and legislators. But yeah, there's always a danger when you start delving into national politics, especially when some of those maybe endorsements maybe doesn't directly affect your membership. So we maybe need to re-strategize and take maybe another approach on actually trying to decide what issue to get involved with, especially when you start talking about national politics.
Right. And, in terms of national politics, we know that, there's a number of mayoral races in the country, chiefly in Chicago. Lori Lightfoot, she's very much on the defensive right now and talking about her strategy with policing in that city. I wanted to get your sense as to the job, how you think New York City Mayor Eric Adams has done in terms of this issue. He, like yourself, has a law enforcement background. I think a lot of Democrats were excited about him because he is seen as, maybe not middle of the road, but more of a moderate in a sense on this issue. He's able to understand, as a black man, as a former police officer, a lot of these nuances. How do you think he's navigated this so far?
Well, he has some challenges. The previous administration have set up some of these policies that has caused the, him to really have a tough time.
Yeah.
But when you start looking at some of the policies again, and unfortunately some of them is from the left, and I myself is more of a moderate in terms of my politics. But at the end of the day, New York City deserves quality policing, but we just got to find some sort of middle ground where you have quality policing, and at the same time, don't handcuff the police. And that balance is what the mayor is currently trying to do. Don't always agree with some of the policies that he's made, but given the other candidates at the time he was running, I think that personally he did, put that middle of the road and be able to, address some of the concerns of the community, but at the same time, be able to defend the police, especially when you start talking about some of those split-second decisions and those tough decisions that the men and women of the New York City Police Department have to make on a day-to-day basis. And as far as I'm concerned, New York City police officers are the greatest cops in the world.
So speaking of those cops, and specifically the cops on the ground, the guys, the men and women you want to represent as head of the union, what is their most urgent need? Is it on the labor side? You mentioned poor pay, maybe not great equipment, being put in difficult situations from a labor standpoint, or is it the tactical situation, as you say, being handcuffed? What's more urgent?
Compensation. Listen, there's a myriad of problems right now going with the New York City Police Department, but we always have to start with salary. New York obviously is a very expensive place to live. But in addition to the salary issues, we have to start addressing modernizing the union as a whole. Right now, we need to start preparing the next generation of officers to take over the union. And not only that, start to be able to deliver more services and trying to find those areas where, we can talk about financial literacy, some of the mental health needs. These men and women of New York City, when they ride the patrol cars, patrol the subway platforms and the housing developments, they go through a lot of scrutiny, and most of it is unwarranted. But the average man and woman on this job goes out there every day to put their life on the line, and we do that. But right now, we're in a stage where we need to be compensated for that service.
Corey, one last question. Do you think the defund the police movement, much of which we saw start in 2020, do you think that's dead at this point, or do you think there's still a movement within cities like New York City to reallocate some of that funding that would normally go towards police departments?
Right. I think that issue is still alive. It's not right. When you start talking about services, at the end of the day, the woman that lives in wherever part of New York City, all they want to do is send their son and daughter to go to school without having to worry about getting their cell phone taken, to go get a loaf of bread, to buy groceries and come back home safe. When you start talking about defunding the police, you start talking about taking away those services, unfortunately, our poor communities are going to be the biggest losers. When you have bad policy, the biggest losers are going to be people in these poor communities. So when you start talking about that, sometimes there's this romantic idea about, how you do defund the police, but no one has given a definitive reason on how to reallocate those services. And then you're not looking at education and some of those things, and fix that, because there's a direct link between education and crime. But as far as defunding the police as a whole, it's not right. And when I become elected, I will definitely have those conversations to prevent that.
Well, Corey, thank you so much for all of your perspective, and stay safe on the campaign trail in New York City. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks again, and I definitely appreciate this opportunity. God bless you all.
Well, that's it for us this week, and we'll see you next time on What America's Thinking.